Hello horror hounds, welcome to my horror house and welcome back to the clumsily titled Halloweek movie marathon series. I've got the week off in the run up to Halloween on Friday and I wanted to try and squeeze in as many little movie marathon runs as I can in that time. And to keep things interesting, I've decided to theme them. So the inaugural run was on a Monster Mash theme. Today, in solidarity with the clumsiness of the title of this whole endeavour, I've decided for a very clumsily titled theme. It is The Night of the Night of These. Every movie in this little run will be titled Night of the something or other, and I'm very excited because one of the movies included is one that I haven't seen before and that I have been eager to see for years. That's later. First things first, we're going to kick off with The Night of the, can you guess? Living Dead. But to keep things spicy, it's going to be the 1990 Tom Savini remake. So, Barbara, we're coming to get you. I got changed into my comfy dressing gown to watch this one. And honestly, I remember liking this version of Night of the Living Dead more than this viewing suggested. It felt a bit plodding and soulless, if I'm honest. Perhaps it's the allure, the promise of Tom Savini at the helm of a remake of Night of the Living Dead at the start of the 90s with all practical zombie effects. That sets the bar of expectations quite high. Now, I'm aware that some of the more overt gore effects were cut by the MPAA. Tom Savini suggests that hurt the film in the eyes of the fans, and he is probably right. But if the point of remaking Night of the Living Dead is to showcase superior practical special effects, I'm not entirely sure that's the greatest reason to remake a movie. I suspect that George Romero was on board remaking it for copyright reasons, if you know your Night of the Living Dead history. But to be honest, I would suggest that the practical effects in George Romero's Day of the Dead are on an absolutely different level to this movie, and that film goes hand in hand with some of the subtext and social commentary that George Romero often puts in his movies, whereas there is none of that in this film. The best reason to watch this movie really is Tony Todd's leading man turn. He's superb in it. Everyone else is kind of acting at 11 and staying at 11. There's a lot of shouting, a lot of shrieking, a lot of argy-bargy, pushing and pulling and fisticuffs. And honestly, I remember the stuff that happens inside the farmhouse in the original movie being a little more nuanced than that. The setup always made me think of the classic Twilight Zone episode, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. You get the sort of surrounding sci-fi or horror scenario is the canvas on which you're painting a story about how a group of people under pressure come together and how those fracture lines form and alliances form, and they can probably get through it all if they work together, but people are just incapable of working together. So sadly, it's a version that feels like it's going through the motions more than a film with a heart and a soul and a real reason for this movie to be remade artistically, which is a sad thing to say. The music is very synthy, plinky plonky. It reminds me of like Full Moon movies, child band productions, that kind of music, which doesn't help. So all in all, I'll be honest, the next time, and probably from here on out, I want to watch Night of the Living Dead, it's going to be the original all the way. Thank you very much. But this is just the beginning of my Night of the Night ofs. And next up is a movie I've seen only once before. I'm very eager to rewatch it because I remember it being a hell of a lot of fun. Number 2 in Night of the Night Ofs is Night of the Comet. Let's go. Well, that was a fun slice of cult 80s cinema, possibly more sci-fi than horror. Night of the Comet deals with the return of a comet, surprisingly enough, into the path of Earth's orbit. It's on a huge orbit itself, so the last time the Earth and this comet met was 65 million years ago when the dinosaurs became extinct. Can you see where this is going? And the entire of the planet Earth moves through the tail of this comet. We'll ignore the relative sizes and the science and all of that, because this is essentially it's John Wyndham's Day of the Triffids setup. Everyone who is out to see this global, spectacular, once-in-a-lifetime light show are essentially reduced to dust. It's a little bit like the day after the rapture, but we follow a pair of sisters, Valley Girls from Los Angeles, who, for various plot reasons, weren't out to witness this event, but were in fact sheltered. So they find themselves, at first, seemingly the two lone survivors at the end of the world. We do find out that there are more survivors. There's a group of scientists who went into an underground bunker who are monitoring for survivors to try and find a serum from their blood, because we also find out that people who are sort of mildly affected or dosed by this, whatever it is, radiation, cosmic rays, blah, 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 rather than dying instantly, they're dying more slowly and get turned into cannibalistic zombies. And this, for me, that was the real nuggets to enjoy in this. Probably the most horror-tinged and my favourite aspect of it, unfortunately, was a nightmare sequence with a couple of zombie traffic cops. We meet a couple of other zombies along the way. I really, really would have liked that angle of it to be amped up, but that's just to my personal tastes. The whole thing looks 80s, it sounds 80s. Reportedly a inspiration for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You can kind of see that. One of the sisters is a cheerleader, so a Valley Girl cheerleader in sort of remarkable world-ending scenarios. You can kind of see how that would work. So whilst it's fun, it is perhaps a little slow, and perhaps for budgetary reasons there are no great set pieces. There are no huge action set pieces. There's no mobs of zombies like you see in 28 Days Later, which takes that John Wyndham Day of the Triffids start premise and applies it to zombies, for want of a better word. And in John Wyndham's story, it turns humanity who witnesses it, most of them blind, so the human race gets knocked down the pecking order. And read Day of the Triffids. It's a fantastic book. And with Night of the Comet, you get an awful lot of these girls hanging around after the end of the world, trying to fill their days, going to the mall, they go to the radio station, they meet other survivors, the scientists are after them. There's a roving gang that's sort of after them in the mall, but nothing really coalesces. It's almost like little skits in a way. Fun enough. I could have tailored it more to my taste in my mind, but that's just me. All the way through, I was thinking this would make a rollicking good little horror novella without having to worry about budgets. You could really have more zombies, more set pieces, more action, a lot to enjoy. But the next film is what I'm really looking forward to. That's the one I haven't seen yet, and the one that I've been most looking forward to. We're going to move from Night of the Living Dead to Night of the Comet, and on now, first time watch for me, Night of the Creeps. Let's get our Tom Atkins on. So we're wrapping up the morning after the night before again, and we've only managed to squeeze 3 movies into this mini marathon again. But don't worry, the operation's going to get a lot slicker from tomorrow once my wife goes back to work. But first time watch of Night of the Creeps, and it's kind of everything I wanted from it. There's stuff in here that I wanted for Night of the Comet. I love the vibe and the look of Night of the Comet. I'd have just liked it to have been a little more rammed with some crazier stuff, especially since you've got infected and zombies potentially running around. Here, we get all of that. What is promised, we kind of do get. Yes, it's an alien sort of slug entity that comes to Earth and infects someone, and that person becomes then sort of zombified until their head explodes and they spew out even more slug creatures who infect even more people. And it's set mainly on and around sort of university, fraternity and sorority houses, culminating on the night of the big dance. And it's a sort of homage to 1950s B movies. I guess the kind of stuff that Fred Decker, the writer-director of this, would have loved as a kid. You see an awful lot of that in the 80s. Toby Hooper's Invaders from Mars, David Cronenberg's The Fly, John Carpenter's The Thing, Chuck Russell's remake of The Blob. Lots and lots and lots of filmmakers in the 80s looking back to the 50s and their nostalgia and their childhood and trying to recreate the essence of those things. George Lucas with the serialized stuff, wrapping that into Star Wars and especially into Indiana Jones. And I feel that Night of the Creeps sort of like sits alongside that. It's not repurposing a property that came before, but it's sort of putting as many of the B-movie, science fiction and horror movie tropes into a blender as you possibly can and trying to make a good time party fun movie with it, and pretty much succeeding, not least because the absolute cherry on this ice cream sundae is Tom Atkins as your cynical, down at heel, seen it all before police detective who gets to bounce off the younger performers and maybe some of the more optimistic and youthful characters and maybe some of the actors who have been in the trenches less than Tom Atkins. A rising tide raises all ships in this movie, and Tom Atkins is that rising tide. Why it's taken me so long to see this performance of his when it's almost instantly become one of my favourites is beyond me. But I've got there in the end. And the movie is just a lovely cavalcade of sort of slightly off-kilter humour, a little irreverence, and full-on practical effects. I think you can see similar inspirations and a similar outcome of sort of tone and attitude in something like James Gunn's Slither. Really, although I did want to try and squeeze in Night of the Demons, which I think would have been a great sort of Halloween party vibe capper to this themed run, finishing with Night of the Creeps. There's no real downside to that. It's a great fun movie. And next, we're gonna lock this down. I'm gonna be much more efficient with my recording, with my viewing. We're gonna get more than 3 movies in. I'll tell you the theme in a minute while I've got your ear, and thank you for still being here. 'Tis the season, spooky season, through into autumn and winter. The perfect time, I would suggest, for buying one of my horror books, either my horror short story collection, 17 Stories of Death and Desire. Stand by this. I think it's a really good collection. I think you'll enjoy it. Or my standalone horror novella, TOADHEAD, which is broadly inspired by the life and crimes of Ed Gein, he who is the subject currently of the Monster Netflix season, but inspiration for Psycho, Silence of the Lambs, Texas Chainsaw Massacre in part. So this is sort of my addition to the expanded Ed Gein fictional horror universe. And the next movie marathon Halloweek entry is, I'll be completely honest with you, it's a bloody brilliant excuse to go through movies in my collection that have been sat there for ages that I haven't had a chance to get round to watching yet, and I have got a backlog of loads of Italian movies from the 70s and 80s, loads of giallo. So the next mini movie marathon for Halloweek will be, and I hope you can join me, Giallo a Go-Go.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.